Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're so happy that you're here with us. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility.
Hello, and welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. I'm Anne, and I'm so glad to have you with us here today. I'm also excited that we have two very special guests, part of our Springs in the Desert community, Stacy and Todd Stephenson, and they're going to be joining me in just a moment. But, we're recording this on a Saturday in November. I'm here in central Pennsylvania where it is sunny, but it's a little bit crisp out there. I went out this morning and there was a little chill in the air. And I was really starting to kind of get that holiday feeling. I was getting into the spirit as I was out and about. And it was really great. I was just really feeling so good and so thankful to start to feel that kind of holiday feeling. But I'm also aware that there are a lot of people for whom this holiday time is really difficult. There are people who may have lost a loved one, and so this is a tough time for them. They may be far from their family or their friends, and the holidays are sad times. Or maybe they work in jobs that really keep them busy and maybe even working on Christmas Day. And so it's really hard for them to kind of get into that spirit. So we know that the holiday season is not always as joy-filled as it should be for many people. And I think that when you add on this burden of infertility that so many of us carry, the holidays can be even more difficult, and they can just sort of bring on a whole lot of other emotions that can be really difficult to deal with. So today we wanted to talk about the holidays and celebrating as a couple who is living in a season of infertility. And so I'm so excited to have Stacy and Todd with us. They have been part of our Springs in the Desert community for quite a while now, and they've written on our blog, and we're just so excited to have them on the podcast for today. So welcome, Todd and Stacy.
Thanks, Anne. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, let's start off with, for those out there who haven't maybe read your blog post yet, to get to know you a little bit, tell us a little bit of your story.
Thanks, Anne. We Stacey, I'm really glad to be with you. Of our story is we met later in life and had both had a desire to be married, but hadn't gotten married, and fortunately got married later in life. God brought us together through a mutual friend, and as you'd expect, one of the topics as we were getting ready to get married was the possibility of children. And at the time we talked about, recognized that for age and some other factors that it might be a challenge, and we still had the hope. And as things played out after we got married, it became clear we were dealing with infertility, and approached it differently. And it's taken us we're, as you'll see through other things we talk about, we continue to be a work of progress. But initially, it posed kind of major challenges for us, and took us to kind of recognize that we needed some support, and have been working through it, and I think making strides the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you add?
I would say that when we were doing our marriage prep, we had said at that time, open hands, open hearts. If we don't have children, then we'll have children in our lives. It's one thing to say that when you're in marriage prep and you're looking ahead and things are so hopeful and joyful. When we got into the thick of things, that phrase came up, and I said, I know we said that, and this is harder than I thought. It's one thing to be on the outside saying that. In the thick of it, it got harder. And we went through a lot of the same treatments that other people in the community have went through. We did the charting, did the HCG injections. We did a lot of that, and it just didn't come to be. And so we, as others out there know, how husbands and wives cope with that. It's very different.
Right.
And as Todd said, that's when we sought some additional assistance. We were so grateful to find the Springs in the Desert community kind of in the midst of the pandemic, because it really helped to reduce a lot of the isolation and all of the emotions and feelings. When you start to hear other people echo that, you think, oh, thank goodness I'm not alone. So I think since we've been getting support, have learned how to walk with each other. And we've also just been looking for ways to give life to others, to other kids in our life, at our church, in our families. So that's kind of how that's evolved and played out.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that a lot of what you say resonates with me. My husband and I met later in life, and so, our paths have kind of a similar trajectory. But I know that for all of our friends out there, hearing what you're saying so much resonates. And some of the things that you were saying about isolation and trying to cope and looking for support really kind of dovetails with our topic today of talking about the holidays and how difficult that can be in general. But when you're carrying this burden of infertility, that can be so much magnified. And so we're going to get into that in a moment and talk about maybe some practical strategies for approaching the holidays. But first, I want to ask you about this idea of a married couple as a family. And I know that you both, that's something that has been really kind of close to your hearts. I think something you've really been thinking through. So talk to me about how you think that we can understand ourselves as married couples in a season of infertility as a family ourselves.
I think the number one reason for that is that's how God sees us, and the church as reflective of that sees us, and so that kind of starting with that, practically, it's, I think for us, that's something we've as we mentioned a couple minutes ago, and we've gotten initially and got support through a very helpful counselor. And I think one of the things that through that idea of we are a family is something that's been, it's truth, and it's been helpful to us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And where I first remember that notion coming to be was actually in our marriage prep, and as we did a marriage encounter, and that was something that was emphasized right off the bat, of that through the sacrament of marriage, we are a family. And I think, and we really kind of held on to that. And as Todd said, our counselor has certainly brought that up. I think where that becomes important is, while that's how the church sees us, as we start to interact in our society, a lot of times we hear language that talks about children define the family. So I think that's why it's become so important to us, to remind us and to remind others on this journey that that children are a gift. They're a beautiful addition to a family, but they're just that. They're an addition. They don't define the family. And I think that becomes especially important as we move into the holidays, and and we start to get postcards with all these beautiful pictures of families with children, that can be a trigger as well. So I think how that's why it's become kind of a centering point for us.
And with the domestic church, I mean, the home, that's a primary place, maybe the primary place, or where, so it's, um, live out our faith and grow in faith, and we're helping, we're helping each other. I mean, that is, we may be in our workplace or whatever folks do, but one place we know we are is at, will be is at home. And so to have a home, a family that reflects the, our faith and just our continuing to grow, is, I think, another part where, um, you know, God created families, so we got the opportunity, the blessing to live out that experience
and be a mini church in our home.
Yeah, Stacy, I'm so glad that you brought that up. That's the idea of the domestic church, right? This church in miniature. And, this is something that we get from the tradition. I mean, St. Paul talks about it, so it's there in scripture. The church fathers talk about it. I was just reflecting before we came on together here on St. John Chrysostom. He's one of my favorite church fathers, and he wrote a number of homilies on marriage and family life where he certainly talks about children. And you are right, children are a gift and such a beautiful part of the family. But Chrysostom talks so much about that bond between husband and wife. And he talks a lot about the necessity for husband and wife to pray together, to create this little church in their homes. There's this beautiful passage in one of his homilies where he says, pray together at home and go to church. When you come back home, let each ask the other the meaning of the readings and the prayers. So, he's really saying that the husband and wife are there to not just pray with each other and educate potentially children, but to educate each other in the faith, right? To walk with each other and lift each other up in the faith. And he goes on to say, remind one another that nothing in life is to be feared except offending God. If your marriage is like this, your perfection will rival the holiest of monks. So I just find that so inspiring and just so affirming of my relationship with my husband, and this idea that we are a little church, a place where God should live. I mean, God should not just be a guest in our home, right? But he should be part of the family,
right?
In a sense, right?
There.
Yeah, that's right. So I just think that that's so important for us. And one more thing, I was also looking at Pope Francis' encyclical Amoris Laetitia, and he says in number 178, even in cases where despite the intense desire of the spouses, there are no children, marriage still retains its character of being a whole manner and communion of life and preserves its value and indissolubility. And so I just think that we should really take all of these affirmations of the good of our marriages and the necessity to really nurture and uplift each other in our marriages.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when you think about all of that, like bringing that into the context of celebrating Advent and Christmas, there's just a lot of joy there to lean into.
Yeah, that's right. And let's get into that because, as I said in my introduction, the holidays are difficult for people for any number of reasons. But when you add on this, living in a season of infertility, and especially for those of us where that season has really stretched out for a long time, and that can be really tough. let's talk about some of the ways that we can kind of enter a little bit more deeply into the holidays. And, I'm thinking even about Thanksgiving, about, you mentioned Advent, Stacy, Christmas, even New Year's. Let's kind of talk about that a little bit, and look at maybe some practical ways to celebrate together and to kind of find that joy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely something, and we'll just say this, like, won't be any surprise to anyone who knows us or gets to know us. We're a work in progress individually and as a family. I think something that for us has been not just helpful but generally fun is to carve out, just like any other family, some specific traditions during we'll say during Advent, leading into the Christmas season. And I don't think there'll be a big surprise probably, but I mean, one thing is we um, usually right after Thanksgiving, really enjoy decorating the house and the outside for Christmas in a way that's kind of unique to our family. We, again, not a surprise that we taken some traditions from each of our families and growing up, and then have added our own. And I think just that time, it's usually we do it over a course of several chunks on a weekend or a little bit during the week, and it's time together, it's family time together, that's really enjoyable, and it's our family time.
And I think it also leads into kind of the retelling of Christmas stories growing up. And, you might think we just celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. So even though we've told a lot of those stories, they're fun to retell. New stories come out. There are stories about Christmas ornaments, stories about favorite, most memorable Christmas growing up, different family traditions. So it's fun in the process of decorating that there's just all of this kind of conversation around our families of origin, and then bringing that together into this family
to our current, and then looking ahead. And it's just so that having that time, I mean, that's something that we look forward to, and that's a unique family time. And I think it's an example, to say more generally, as we certainly uh, Thanksgiving coming up soon, or heading into Advent, and then the Christmas season, we will spend time with extended family, just like a lot of folks will. And we also have our own family time, and that sort of decorating, getting ready is an example of that. So I think having that, for us anyway, having that distinction, the distinct, some time with extended family and time with us,
this family,
with this family is important and helpful.
Yeah, I love that. And Stacy, I love what you said about how you use that time, maybe you're pulling out a particular ornament or the nativity set that came from one of your families. And then that's an opportunity to tell stories about your own childhood and your own family of origin. And, it just shows that no matter how long we're together, I mean, there's always more to learn about each other, right? And to learn about our families. And so, like, what a beautiful way for you to deepen your relationship and to kind of learn about each other a little bit more. And, those times when maybe you've heard that story, Todd, maybe you've heard it, 10 times. And when you can start finishing the story for Stacy, like that's so beautiful, because it shows, number one, that you're listening, which is important, right? But that, in some way, like you are taking up, part of her story into your own. I just think that's such a beautiful way to kind of build up and nurture the marital relationship while you're in the midst of doing something that is, some people look at as a chore, you know, decorating or putting up the Christmas lights or whatever it might be. So yeah, I just love that. I love that. What are some other traditions that maybe you have, or things that you think our friends out there might be able to incorporate that can help them build up their relationship and just kind of enter more into the season of the coming of the Savior?
Yeah. So something that, as we said, we're a work in progress. So something that we have done for the first time this year that has been wonderful is we have been praying the Christ the King novena as we journey towards that, really like this weekend. So of course, by the time this airs, that will be past, but it could be thinking about another, there certainly are other novenas as we get closer to the Christmas season. So that making that an intentional thing that we've done every morning has just been a wonderful thing, a wonderful way to think about entering into Advent. Something we always have out an Advent wreath. Sometimes it's hit and miss as to how much we like that at home and go through the prayers, but that's something that we're hoping to strengthen a bit this year, is kind of leaning into the season of Advent. So those are a couple of things that immediately come to mind.
Yeah, there's some areas where we've sort of identified we can up our game a bit, and looking forward to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's really an important point too, because it's not that we're striving after perfection, right? And so, if some days are more difficult than others and we don't feel like putting on the Christmas music, we don't have to. Or if we kind of get this prayer routine set and every once in a while we miss it, that's okay. It's that kind of effort that we're putting into it that that counts. And just, I think, as long as we are just kind of in that together and communicating with each other, maybe this is a particularly difficult time for one of us, and we're not feeling much in the spirit, right? If we're at least communicating with each other, we can talk with each other, then we can be present to our spouse and kind of help each other through that time and that moment. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. I know for my husband and I, the Feast of St. Nicholas is a tradition that we both grew up with as children. And so on the day before his feast on the 6th of December, as kids, we would put out our shoes, and then the next day we would wake up, and of course St. Nicholas had brought us treats. And so we still do that. We put our shoes out, and lo and behold, St. Nicholas has brought us some treats. So, we sometimes hear, Christmas is for children, and then that, can kind of bring us down a little bit. But didn't Jesus say that we have to become like children, right, before the Father? So I think it's great for us to even do those kinds of things that we did growing up as kids.
Absolutely, to continue and identify those things, to make it part of the current family tradition. And if I'm not jumping too far ahead, I think something else that we've talked about and been intentional about is, even when we're getting together with extended family for at Christmas Day, we're, for us, trying to make it a priority to be at Mass at our home church, so that we're even if we're going someplace later that night or the next day that's great. But just being at our home church, I think that's something that's that's our family church. And so to the extent we can be there Christmas Eve, that's something I think I mean, it's always good to be at Mass on Christmas Eve, of course, and being at our home church is something to prioritize.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's really great. Let's talk a little bit about
And can I go back to something?
Oh, sure, please.
When you were talking earlier about, if it's a difficult time, or you're not feeling the prayer, share that with your spouse. I just want to just echo that. I think that's something that we learned in our counseling sessions, was just the power of letting the other in. And even if it's as simple as saying, today was a really difficult day because people at work were talking about taking their kids to see Santa, or, I walked into Target and I saw 3 pregnant ladies. Just giving voice to that, I know for both of us, it has really let out some of that internal tension. And so while that's an important strategy anytime, I think especially during this season as well. So I just wanted to echo that point.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're so right. And I think that, this season of Christmas, the fact that God becomes man and that he comes in the form of a baby who is so helpless and vulnerable shows us that we too can be sort of helpless, if you will, and vulnerable, not only in front of our spouses. We should really feel free to entrust ourselves to our spouses when we're having those kinds of feelings and difficulties, but especially that we can entrust all of our vulnerability, all of our sadness or emotions, whatever it is, to Jesus. I mean, that's why he came into this world.
Absolutely.
To take all of that. He wants us to give all of that to him. And so, as much as we share that and should share that with our spouses, Jesus wants us to share all that with him too. He wants to take that burden onto himself.
Yeah, so well said, Anne. And, I found earlier in the journey, I realized I was talking at God rather than with. And I think inviting him, as we've gotten further along, I've realized inviting him into the conversation, and even inviting him to the Lord, we want to celebrate you this season. And it has its painful moments, be with us, help us, show us opportunities where we can give to others, where we can celebrate you, and be with us in those moments of sadness. And just inviting him in, as you said, I think is so key.
Yeah, amen. I love that. There may have been no room at the inn for Jesus, but we can make room in our hearts for him. He wants to come in and be with us and help us carry these burdens. So yeah, so beautiful, so beautifully said. This time is going so quickly. There's so much more we could talk about. So we're going to wrap up here in a couple of minutes, but let's just talk a little bit, if you would, about some of the ways that we can be really radically available to others, especially during the holiday season. This is such a hurting world, right? There's just so much loneliness and sadness, and how can we really be fruitful in this radical availability that we have? What are some thoughts or some things that you do specifically during the holiday time?
So I think one thing that comes to mind is just, as we're present and as we're listening and talking to families and friends, and being on the lookout for needs, and actually even inviting the Lord to show us where those needs are. I had a conversation with a friend who was talking about how she wanted to teach her young daughter about Advent and to focus on Advent before we get to Christmas. So I just reached out to her and said, hey, how can I support you in that? I'd love to send something. Tell me what you're looking at, what you're thinking about. And she gave me some ideas. I had an idea. And so I said to her, hey, there's some things that are coming your way and coming your daughter's way. That just kind of evolved. So I think just kind of listening and being aware of those opportunities.
Yeah. Echo that. I think they really, not by coincidence, do present themselves, throughout the year, but particularly this, this time of year, and so I think, whether it's opportunity to help someone, through church or somewhere else that we don't know that well, or being extra, something to be a challenge for me in particular, but kind of extra patient and understanding towards extended family and situations, and just being being a positive presence can really help make people look back at this time and be glad that they had the holiday experience.
And I think also, I'm sure our parish has some outreach programs during this time. I know others do as well. So that's is sometimes an easy way of something that's already structured and fairly easy to access to plug into as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are so many opportunities for us to just open our hearts, open our homes in hospitality. And as you said, Stacy, so many ways to just be present to other people, who are in need. And I think sometimes for those of us who struggle with infertility, that's a burden on us, but it also kind of makes us more aware, I think, and almost more sensitive really to the needs and the struggles of others. And so that part of this whole experience, I think, is a beautiful gift. And I think it's also a way that we can really be a witness to other marriages, and to those marriages that do have children, that we can be a witness to the importance of nurturing that relationship with each other, and being open and generous to our parishes, to our communities, to this whole world that just needs that strong witness of love and faith. Stacy and Todd, you are an amazing witness of love and faith and such a beautiful marriage. And I thank you so much for joining us and for sharing yourselves with us today.
Thanks, Anne, for the encouraging words and the opportunity to have this conversation.
Yeah, and it's such a gift to be part of the Springs community as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And we thank everybody for joining us today. God bless you. We love you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. If you have a minute, please rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and hear about more things that we have going on. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.